Right after flipping our 4th of July pancakes, I found a neon orange violation notice stuck to Grandpa's porch column, same spot where he hung the flag every year. Name's Ellie Walker, 34, freelance writer, currently sweating under a buzzing fluorescent light and gripping a chipped mug that used to be Grandma's. That morning, the porch wasn't the only thing labeled non-compliant. Ever had your peace find in your own home? Ellie watched the sunrise from her aunt's old wooden porch, the scent of bacon and maple drifting in from the kitchen, unaware that today would spark a quiet rebellion in Oak Hollow. The porch creaked gently beneath her bare feet as she stepped onto the sun-warmed boards, a chipped mug of coffee in hand. Below, the trimmed hedges of the cul-de-sac glistened with dew, and American flags fluttered lazily from mailboxes. Across the street, Mrs. Bloom adjusted a sun hat before turning her hose to the bed of petunias that hung like living chandeliers from her eaves. She waved with 2 fingers, and Ellie returned the gesture with a small smile. Inside, the hiss of bacon continued, paired with the comforting gurgle of an old drip coffee machine. Grandpa Jack emerged from the kitchen a minute later with the morning's Oak Hollow Gazette tucked beneath one arm and a plate balanced in the other, 2 eggs, 3 bacon, biscuit with jam. The local diner never changed. Still reading the paper, huh? Ellie teased as he settled into the rocking chair beside her. Phones break. Ink doesn't, he said, unfolding the paper with a crisp snap. Besides, the obituaries remind me who I've outlasted. They shared a quiet chuckle before falling into companionable silence, broken only by cicadas and the occasional chirp of robins. Jack tapped the edge of the page. Used to be, he said, you could sit out here all morning and folks would come by, pull up a chair, maybe leave with a jar of jam. Your uncle called it the social engine of the neighborhood. His eyes glinted with memory. 4th of July, we'd hang bunting and pass lemonade to the kids on bikes. I promised I'd keep it just like this, Ellie said softly, eyes scanning the porch's worn railing, the same one her uncle sanded down every spring. The moment was cut short by the crunch of gravel, heels on the driveway. Karen Hensley's smile arrived first, sharp and practiced, followed by the more apologetic expression of Vince, the HOA's part-time inspector. Karen clutched her clipboard like a weapon of etiquette. Good morning, she chirped. Beautiful sunrise, isn't it? Shame about the porch, though. Jack's chair stopped rocking. Ellie stood. Is there a problem? Vince handed over a sheet with a yellow sticker on top. Historical noncompliance. The railing design doesn't match approved standards from the Oak Hollow Preservation Covenant, Section B 6. Ellie blinked. It's original to the house. Built in 1929. Karen's smile remained frozen. Exactly. It no longer meets safety or visual uniformity standards. Jack muttered something under his breath about uniformity and nonsense. We'll need modifications submitted within 10 business days, Vince added, a little sheepishly. Ellie accepted the paper, eyes scanning the list of codes and legalese. Her jaw clenched, but she stayed polite. I'll review this, she said calmly. Thank you. As the pair retreated, Jack spat into the grass. Clipboard tyrants. Your aunt would have told them to take a hike. Later, after cleaning up breakfast, Ellie sat with her laptop on the sunroom table, navigating the HOA website. It was dense, full of PDFs and contradictory paragraphs. A recent update listed nearly a dozen homes as, in review, for porch or railing citations, mostly those with original woodwork or lattice. A pattern began to form, one that made her pulse quicken. She rubbed her temples, rereading the fine print. A soft knock came at the back screen. Mrs. Bloom, holding 2 sweating glasses of lemonade. Thought you could use one, she said with a wink. Ellie accepted gratefully. Thank you. Seems we're suddenly non-compliant. Mrs. Bloom's face crinkled in sympathy. You're not the first. Just the first to push back. Ellie's eyebrows rose. What do you mean? The older woman sipped. Let's just say, the porch police have been busy. Most folks don't want trouble. But you're Jack. Trouble never scared him. That evening, Ellie drafted a carefully worded email. She requested official documentation and clarification on historical code updates. She carbon copied 3 nearby homeowners who were also listed in the "In Review" section. Jack leaned over her shoulder. "You don't poke the bear, Elle." "I'm not poking," she said, hitting send. "I'm asking questions." At sunset, the cicadas had quieted and the porch was bathed in warm gold. Ellie stepped outside again, this time with a fresh mug of tea. Something fluttered on the front door. She approached. A second notice, this time stapled at an angle, the paper fluttering like a challenge. Jack stepped behind her, arms crossed. It read, "Second notice, immediate action required." Jack chuckled, low and steady. "It's on now." At the Hollow Mug Cafe, Ellie nursed an iced tea while eavesdropping on seniors grumbling about HOA rules. She swirled the ice in her glass, watching the condensation trail down its side. The hollow mug was as much a part of Oak Hollow as the courthouse steps or the July 4th parade. Its walls were cluttered with black and white photos of the town from the 1940s, shelves lined with mismatched coffee mugs locals donated over the years. A battered jukebox played low jazz, and the scent of cinnamon rolls hung permanently in the air. On this particular afternoon, red, white and blue bunting curled slightly in the heat above the door. American flags stood proudly in mason jars on every table, including Ellie's, where the tea was already beginning to lose its chill. Near the back, for retirees were halfway through a round of dominoes, their conversation laced with the kind of slow-burning frustration only experience could fuel. "I told M," one said, slapping down a tile, "you'll have to pry that birdhouse from my cold, arthritic hands." The others chuckled, but it carried a bitter edge. Old George got fined for his wind chimes. Said it was auditory clutter. Can you believe that? Ellie listened with interest, sipping slowly. She didn't want to intrude, not yet. But the words prickled something under her skin. The second notice stapled to Jack's door hadn't just been aggressive, it had felt like a dare. At first, she thought maybe they'd been singled out. But now? This sounded like a pattern. Marlene, the barista, wiped down the counter with a practiced rhythm. Her short gray curls bounced as she leaned in toward Ellie with a conspiratorial tilt. "Word is," she said, "they fined old Mr. Struthers last month. He had a flagpole. Nothing fancy, just one he'd used since Desert Storm. They said it wasn't regulation height." She snorted. "Regulation, my rear end." Ellie blinked. "A veteran?" Marlene nodded. 93. Hasn't missed a Memorial Day ceremony since Truman. That did it. Ellie pulled a notebook from her bag, soft leather cover, fraying at the corners, and began jotting quick notes. Wind chimes. Flagpole. Porch lattice. Auditory clutter. The terminology alone made her stomach twist. "First time here," came a voice beside her. She looked up. The man standing there wore khakis, a pale blue button-down, and the kind of face that had weathered more than a few storms but still chose kindness. His glasses slipped slightly down his nose as he extended a hand. "Carter Linwood," he said. "You look like someone who's just read the HOA bylaws." Ellie shook his hand. "Ellie Walker." "And yes, unfortunately." Carter slid into the seat across from her with the comfort of someone who didn't ask permission so much as assumed it would be granted. "I represented a neighbor once. They fined her for having too many tomato plants. Said the trellis constituted an unauthorized vertical structure." "That sounds made up." "Oh, it was real. We won, though." He smiled faintly. HOAs like to hide behind their bylaws. Most residents never read them. But the language is often vague and enforcement selective. Ellie leaned forward, intrigued. "I think they're targeting historical elements, porches, railings, old flag mounts. I checked the website. A bunch of citations have gone out the past 3 weeks." He nodded. "Same pattern last summer. Different board members, but same tactics." From the back, the domino game erupted in soft curses and laughter. Used to be, one of the retirees called, you could sit on your porch in peace, sip your tea, maybe play a little Hank Williams. Now they'll fine you for a squeaky screen door. Carter raised his glass to the squeaky doors of Oak Hollow. Ellie smiled, her pen dancing across the page. Momentum stirred beneath her ribs, an energy she hadn't felt in months. Not just frustration now. Purpose. The screen door to the cafe banged open, and in the distance, a loud boom echoed, one of the downtown fireworks rehearsals, likely for the big show tomorrow. The sound rattled the windows and sent a few coffee cups trembling on their saucers. Well, Carter said after the rumble faded, if you're really curious, I've got some old files, cases, minutes, printouts, that might help. My office is quiet this week. Ellie looked up from her notes. You're offering. I'm inviting. He slid a business card across the table. Later this week. You bring the iced tea, I'll bring the bylaws. She picked up the card, eyes scanning the modest font. Linwood Law and Mediation. No slogan. Just a phone number and address. Marlene appeared at her elbow. Need a refill, hon? Ellie glanced at her empty glass and nodded. And I'll cover his pie. Carter held up a finger. Pecan, like always. Marlene laughed. You keep that up, and we'll name a booth after you. Ellie left a crisp $2 bill on the table for her $4 tea. Marlene's smile, this time, reached her eyes. As she stepped out into the July heat, her phone buzzed. A new text previewed across the screen. HOA board meeting moved to Saturday. Closed session. She stared for a beat too long. The breeze caught her skirt and lifted it slightly, but she barely noticed. Something was shifting. And someone didn't want witnesses. In the attic, Ellie stumbled upon an old journal from Grandma Ruth, filled with porch sketches and notes about neighborly love. The attic smelled of cedar and mothballs, a stillness broken only by the shuffle of cardboard boxes and the hum of summer air through cracked vents. Ellie's flashlight beam danced across dusty rafters and yellowed holiday decorations, eventually resting on a faded floral trunk tucked behind a pile of quilts. Its brass latch gave a reluctant creak as she opened it. Inside lay Ruth's world, handwritten recipes, bundled letters tied with string, and near the bottom, a cloth-bound journal with corners soft from time. Ellie sat cross-legged, brushing off lint, and opened the first page. The handwriting was unmistakably Ruth's, graceful, looping, confident. June 1976, left lemonade out for the new couple. They brought back blueberry pie. Good trade. August 1981, committee said porch railings were too old-fashioned. Jack and I painted them red, white, and blue that weekend instead. Each entry painted a portrait of Oak Hollow as it once was, porch dinners shared between neighbors, disputes settled with conversation and sweet tea rather than fines and formalities. There were sketches too, a wraparound porch with lanterns, kids chasing fireflies, Jack in a rocking chair, Ruth with her apron fluttering. Downstairs, twilight had softened the sharp edges of the day. Ellie joined Jack on the porch, cradling the journal like something sacred. She was fierce, Ellie said. Jack didn't look surprised. She once stood up at an HOA meeting and read aloud a poem about fences being for sheep, not neighbors. Took Em a year to get over it. A soft whistle interrupted them, Zeke from 2 doors down, arms outstretched as he launched a paper airplane toward the street. It dipped, spun, and landed near Jack's foot. Jack bent slowly, picked it up, and handed it back. You'll need a tighter fold on the wings, soldier. Zeke grinned. You were really in the war? Jack nodded. Normandy. Coldest beach I ever stepped on. Were you scared? Jack paused. Most of the time. But scared men still stand when standing's right. Ellie watched the exchange in silence, her throat tightening. This porch, this man, everything worth saving was right here. Later, after Zeke's mother called him in with a porch light blink, Ellie stepped off the porch and walked down Sycamore Lane to Mr. Donnelly's house. He answered in slippers, holding a paintbrush like a scepter. "They got me last year," he said after she explained. Said my shade of white was too reflective. "Can you imagine?" "I can," Ellie said. "Do you still have the paperwork?" He led her into a side room stacked with manila folders. HOA newsletters. Every one since 2013. Figured someday someone might care. She did. She thanked him, tucking the bundle under her arm like treasure. Back home, Jack was humming under his breath, suspended in his rocker. Ellie pulled out her notebook again, spreading papers across the kitchen table. She began assembling a timeline, citations, newsletters, neighbor accounts. Patterns emerged, finds peaked near holiday seasons, clustered around older homes, targeted the same features. In the background, distant fireworks cracked the silence. By 9, she had a working outline, 2 full pages of bullet points, and ink stains on her fingers. She loaded the printer with a fresh pack of paper and opened a blank document. The words came easily. Porch preservation is American tradition. She printed a dozen copies. Then 2 dozen more. Under cover of darkness, barefoot again, she made her way from mailbox to mailbox. Not stealthy exactly, just quiet. Each folded flyer was slipped carefully inside, a note of solidarity. On one porch, a tabby cat watched her. On another, a wind chime jingled faintly in the breeze. Back at the house, Jack had already turned in. The porch swing creaked gently in the night air, fireflies blinking near the hedges. Ellie sat beneath the porch light, finishing the last sliver of Carter's leftover pecan pie. Her eyes wandered upward, stars scattered across a velvet sky, soft thunder rolling somewhere far off. She exhaled. Something felt lighter now, like momentum had shifted. Then she noticed it. The flagpole beside the porch was empty. She stepped closer, heart dropping. Jack's American flag, hand-sewn stars, a gift from Ruth, was gone. Only the bracket remained, its screws still warm from the day's heat. The porch swing creaked again behind her. A glow stick, green and flickering, sat gently in the rocker. Zeke must have left it earlier, she thought. But she didn't move. Not yet. Just stood there, staring at the empty pole, Ruth's journal clutched to her side. Jack's chuckle from the night before echoed in her ears. It was on now. And someone else knew it too. The porch was unusually quiet that morning, no flag, no coffee, just a folded lawn chair and Jack deep in thought. Ellie watched him from the screen door, his hands resting loosely on his knees, eyes fixed on the empty bracket beside the steps. The breeze moved gently through the hanging petunias, but there was no flapping fabric, no stars and stripes to catch it. Even the birds seemed subdued. She brought him a thermos, but he didn't drink right away. It's more than a flag, isn't it? She said quietly, sitting on the top step beside him. Jack nodded without looking at her. It's memory. Duty. Ruth. Ellie's fingers curled around the porch railing, still technically non-compliant, according to the HOA citation in her folder. But at that moment, it felt like the only thing holding up the world. The day didn't wait for their silence to end. From down the hill, drums thudded into rhythm. The parade had begun. On Main Street, Oak Hollow had thrown on its Sunday best. Red, white, and blue bunting wrapped the lampposts. Children darted between stalls with miniature flags, faces sticky from cotton candy and sunblock. Brass instruments gleamed under the July sun, and somewhere near the fire station, a grill sizzled. Ellie and Jack made their way through the crowd, nodding to neighbors, trading greetings. Some looked at Jack and nodded with something more than politeness, respect. Others glanced quickly away, like eye contact might signal disloyalty. Karen Hensley stood near the town gazebo, clutching her clipboard, though no one seemed to be asking for her opinion today. Her blouse clung to her back, and her smile was fixed but fraying. She spotted Ellie but turned briskly toward the pet adoption booth. Just past the lemonade stand, a soft voice called out. Miss Walker. Mrs. Green, the retired librarian, leaned against the booth with a fan in one hand and a manila folder in the other. She wore sunglasses and a wide straw hat that cast striped shadows across her cheeks. "You didn't get this from me," she said, slipping the folder into Ellie's tote bag. "Some of us remember what Oak Hollow used to be." Inside, there were photocopies of HOA meeting minutes, some dating back to the early 2000s, and internal notes from board members. A few pages had names redacted by black marker. Others had comments scribbled in the margins: push compliance, neighbor watching neighbor, test case, porch modification. Ellie's heart thudded faster. Further down the block, the hardware store had a display of porch fixtures, paint samples, decorative rails, wooden spindles. A handwritten sign read, "Porch materials, 20% off, celebrate American craft." The owner, Mr. Landry, gave Ellie a nod. "On principle," he said simply, then winked. "You'll need extra screws. HOA loves loose boards." The scent of pulled pork drifted from a smoker nearby. Ellie and Jack split a sandwich on a bench under the oak trees. Barbecue sauce dripped onto the wax paper as they listened to Mr. Franklin's saxophone version of America the Beautiful. A boy ran through a sprinkler arc across the lawn, trailing laughter. Back home that evening, Ellie opened her laptop and typed in rhythm with the swings creak outside. Her blog had never been political, never confrontational. Just stories, memories, recipes sometimes. But tonight, she had something to say. When tradition gets fined, notes from Oak Hollow's porches. We sit on porches to remember. We build them to feel rooted. But lately, in our town of oak trees and flagpoles, memory has become a liability. My grandfather was fined for the same porch he built with his own hands 40 years ago. We're not the only ones. Maybe it's time Oak Hollow remembered its own foundation. One conversation at a time. One story. One porch. She added 3 photos: Ruth's sketch, Mr. Donnelly's yellowed citation, and a string of wind chimes against a twilight sky. She clicked publish. By bedtime, the post had 46 shares. By midnight, over 200. Jack said nothing when she showed him the numbers. But his eyes crinkled at the corners, and for the first time since the flag went missing, he reached for his coffee mug and poured from the thermos she'd brought earlier. The porch was still quiet. But it felt less alone. The next morning, as Ellie finished sweeping the steps, her phone buzzed. New message, unknown number. Meet me at the Hollow Mug. Tomorrow. Alone. She read it twice. No name. Just that. And she suddenly realized, the quiet was just the beginning. Carter sat with arms crossed, waiting at the cafe window table as Ellie slipped into the booth, nerves tangled in her stomach. Rain tapped lightly on the windows of the Hollow Mug, misting the glass and washing Main Street in a pale gray hush. Inside, the cafe's usual hum was muted, conversations barely above whispers, spoons stirring tea with slow, thoughtful clinks. The cinnamon rolls were already half gone, their scent mingling with hazelnut coffee and something tense in the air. Ellie adjusted her damp ponytail and offered a polite nod to Marlene behind the counter. The barista smiled with thin lips, raised an eyebrow knowingly, then went back to pretending she hadn't noticed anything unusual. Carter didn't say much at first. His eyes followed the rain droplets racing each other down the glass. She said she'd be here by 9, he murmured. Ellie glanced at her watch. 9:16. Just as she began to ask if they should reschedule, the door opened. A woman entered in a navy windbreaker and beige ball cap pulled low, her shoulders hunched and movements wary. She scanned the cafe like someone avoiding a camera lens. When her eyes met Carter's, she nodded once and made her way over. "Miss Jensen?" Ellie asked quietly. The woman removed her cap, revealing short salt and pepper curls and eyes tired beyond her years. She didn't smile. Just slid into the booth beside Carter and placed a manila folder on the table. "I don't have long," she said. "Karen doesn't know I kept these. And if she finds out I met you." "She won't," Carter interrupted, his tone calm but firm. "You're protected under whistleblower provisions if this goes public." Jensen didn't seem reassured. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened the folder, revealing a stack of printed financial statements, handwritten notes, and an envelope sealed with red tape. "It started with the patio fund," she said. "2 years ago, we had a proposal to redo the patio outside the clubhouse, new furniture, accessible ramps, shading, the works. But the funds kept getting deferred." Ellie leaned in. "Deferred where?" "Consulting fees." Jensen pulled out a circled line item. "See here, $18,900 paid to a shell company." "Carter, you know whose name's behind it?" Carter scanned the form. "B. Hemsworth. That's Karen's cousin. He lives in Fairfax. Real estate advisor, at least on paper." Jensen nodded grimly. Karen pushed it through when the board had 3 absences. No vote. A silence settled as the weight of it took root. "You kept copies of all this?" Ellie asked. "Not everything. Some were shredded after board meetings. But I kept these when I resigned." "And the envelope?" Carter asked. Jensen slid it across the table. "If I disappear, open it. Otherwise, don't. I'll meet you Saturday after the board session." Ellie hesitated but took it. "We'll make sure you're safe." Jensen rose slowly. "Don't promise things you can't guarantee, dear." As she left, Carter exhaled through his nose, deep and slow. "That woman's carrying 10 years of guilt. She's scared." Ellie nodded. Her fingers traced the edge of the sealed envelope. The drizzle outside had thickened, streaking the windows like tears. Marlene wandered over, refilling Carter's mug without asking. Her voice dropped just above a whisper. "Y'all planning a mutiny, sweetheart?" she said with a wink. Ellie smiled faintly. "More like telling the truth." The barista chuckled. "Careful. Around here, that's worse." After a few more quiet moments, Carter stood. "I'll draft a basic outline for legal escalation. If we move forward with a community lawsuit, we'll need statements, dates, consistent documentation." "I've been building a file," Ellie replied. "I'll add these." As Carter stepped outside into the drizzle, Ellie pulled out her flip phone and called Jack. The connection crackled, but his voice came through, steady and curious. "It's bigger than I thought," she told him. "They've been rerouting money. For years." Jack whistled. "That explains the marble countertops at Karen's last HOA barbecue." She laughed despite herself. "You're not wrong." Back inside, Ellie noticed a new comment pop up on her blog notification tab. From the local town paper's editor-in-chief. "Want to talk on the record? M.R." Ellie stared at the screen. The momentum was growing. Just then, an HOA notice email hit her inbox. "Notice, special closed-door session this Saturday. Attendance mandatory for all property owners." She read it twice. No explanation. No agenda. She looked out the cafe window. The rain had stopped, but the clouds still loomed low over Oak Hollow. Saturday dawned hot and heavy, as if the air itself knew something was about to break in Oak Hollow. The cicadas shrieked louder than usual, as though protesting the heat. Ellie wiped sweat from her neck as she smoothed her blouse and adjusted the straps on Grandpa Jack's suspenders. He looked into the mirror with solemn eyes, his old American Legion pin catching the light like a tiny badge of honor still holding meaning. At 2:40, they stepped into the Oak Hollow Community Center, its brick facade faded but still proud. The small hall was already filled. Folding chairs scraped across the floor as residents shifted for space. Teens leaned on the back wall, arms crossed. Homemakers clutched notebooks. Veterans in baseball caps sat stiff-backed near the front. Fans buzzed at every corner, stirring the humid air but not the tension. Karen Hensley sat at a folding table up front, clipboard in hand, her signature pastel cardigan clinging to her shoulders despite the heat. Beside her, 2 board members avoided eye contact. The 4th seat was conspicuously empty. Ms. Jensen had not come. Sheriff Mosley stood in the back near the water dispenser, arms crossed, unreadable. At 3 o'clock sharp, Karen tapped the microphone, its feedback whining before settling. "Let's come to order," she began. "Today's session concerns the continued enforcement of our community's maintenance and beautification guidelines. We'll be reviewing recent notices and clarifying compliance procedures." The murmurs started almost immediately, low, restless, incredulous. Ellie felt her pulse climb. Jack's hand found hers briefly. "You're ready." She rose. Karen didn't look pleased. "Excuse me," Ellie said, her voice even but tight. "I'd like to speak." Karen blinked. "This isn't a public comment forum, Ms. Walker. It's a closed session." Ellie opened a thin blue binder and read steadily, "Per HOA Bylaws Section 4.2, all members have the right to question board actions involving community funds, especially in sessions declared mandatory without prior agenda." A murmur rippled across the room. Karen's smile faltered. "You're mistaken." "I'm not," Ellie interrupted, softly. "I checked with a lawyer." All heads turned as Carter stepped forward from the side aisle, holding a folder. Karen stiffened. "Carter Linwood, you're not a resident." "But I represent 3, he replied, voice calm as ever. "And I'm here with documentation." Ellie continued. "I was cited for porch noncompliance. But this is about more than that. It's about where our dues have gone." Jack stood slowly. The room fell silent. Even the fans seemed to hush. "My wife, Ruth, loved that porch," he said, voice low but steady. "She believed it was where community happened, where you offered lemonade to a neighbor, listened to jazz on a Sunday, or cried after bad news. This HOA wasn't supposed to be a weapon. It was meant to protect, not punish." He paused, eyes misting. "She fought for that in the 80s. And now my granddaughter is fighting again. So I ask you all, are you okay with how things have become?" The silence was broken by a single clap. Then another. Soon, the room echoed with applause. Karen banged her gavel once, twice. "This is highly inappropriate. I move to adjourn." "No," someone in the back said. Another voice, "Let her speak." Then, like a rising tide, "Let her speak. Let her speak." Karen's face flushed crimson. She looked at Sheriff Mosley, who did not move. Carter stepped forward, holding up a sheaf of redacted statements. "These are HOA disbursement records. Tens of thousands allocated to consultants and maintenance assessments with no service logs, no receipts. All tied to a family member of the board president." The tension peaked. People leaned forward. A woman fanned herself with a folded newsletter. The air pulsed with expectation. Karen's jaw clenched. Ellie drew a breath, heart hammering. "Then I'll say it plainly, Karen, you used this HOA for your own gain, and we can prove it." Karen's voice cracked for the first time as murmurs turned into demands, and the room shifted, slowly, but undeniably, away from her. A low rustling coursed through the community center like dry leaves in wind, the sound of people no longer watching but waking up. Folding chairs creaked as bodies leaned forward, eyes narrowed, conversations flared in hushed bursts from corner to corner. Ellie didn't need a microphone now. She stepped forward with Miss Jensen's envelope in one hand and Carter's legal binder tucked under her arm. The paper felt damp at the edges, maybe from nerves, maybe from the thickness of the day, but her voice didn't tremble. "This is what I've received," she said clearly. "Invoices paid from the HOA's general fund for landscaping that was never authorized by vote. Checks made out to a Thomas Hensley Landscaping and Groundskeeping. That's Karen's cousin." Gasps followed. Karen shot up from her seat. "You don't know what you're talking about. You've twisted." "I haven't twisted anything," Ellie said, keeping her gaze level. "It's all right here. Pages of transactions labeled consulting and beautification, but the service addresses? They're all in your block. Your side of town. She's making this personal." Karen's voice spiked, red rising fast in her cheeks. This is a vendetta. Her grandfather's violation was justified. Jack, seated in the front, stood slowly and without ceremony. The room hushed. Then tell me this, he said, voice dry but cutting. Why was my porch non-compliant when the McCallans across the street have cracked concrete, weeds in the steps, and haven't passed an inspection in 6 years? Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. Carter adjusted his tie and stepped into the aisle. This isn't a personal matter. This is about trust and misuse. I move for a vote of no confidence against the current HOA leadership. It didn't take long. A ripple of voices began with, I second, followed by, I third, and then someone clapped, slow and loud, and it echoed like thunder. In the back, Sheriff Mosley unfolded his arms. I believe, he said, stepping forward, the town's had enough. The room, charged and humming, tilted further. I'm in favor, said Mrs. Bloom, standing near the water cooler. Me too, added a teenager against the wall, surprisingly loud. A baker in a flour-stained apron stood with lemon bars balanced on a tray. Let's do this, she said. Let's clean house. Vote, came another shout. Karen gripped the gavel like a drowning woman clutches driftwood, but even that slipped from her grasp, clattering to the floor with an awkward, final sound. One by one, hands lifted, quiet, deliberate, undeniable. Yes, Jack said simply, raising his own. Carter tallied by count and consensus, then nodded. Unanimous. Karen stood, her shoulders trembling, lipstick smeared where she'd bitten her lip. Her gaze swept the room, pleading, desperate, then bitter. You'll regret this, she whispered, barely loud enough for the front rows. You think this ends here? A week later, flags fluttered freely again, and the porches of Oak Hollow looked a little brighter, because they stood a little taller. The late afternoon sun draped its golden arms across the streets, tinting white picket fences with a soft rose hue. Cicadas sang a slow rhythm, and the wind carried the scent of fresh paint and blooming hydrangeas. On Jack's porch, a can of sky blue paint sat open beside 2 brushes. Ellie wiped a streak from her cheek and smiled at the way the color glowed in the fading light. Light blue, she said, dipping her brush again. Peaceful. Ruth would approve. Jack grunted, eyes narrowed on a stubborn chip of wood. She hated beige, he said, tapping his brush with stubborn precision. Said it made everything look like hospital walls. They worked quietly for a while. Neighbors strolled past, waving. A young couple from Maple Street brought over lemonade. Little Zeke ran by with a jar full of fireflies and yelled, Your porch looks awesome, Mr. Jack. Darn right it does, Jack called after him. Carter arrived just before sunset, sleeves rolled to his elbows, HOA papers in hand. He handed Ellie a crisp sheet marked with fresh ink. New bylaws passed. Porch regs are now voluntary. HOA members voted to rename the committee, Neighborhood Traditions Board. Jack chuckled. That's a mouthful. Carter shrugged. Democracy's messy, but we made it. Ellie's gaze drifted down the street toward a familiar white SUV rolling past. Karen sat behind the wheel, sunglasses on, face unreadable. A red and white for sale sign sat planted in her yard, leaning slightly left. She didn't stop. She didn't wave. Jack didn't say a word, just picked up his brush and got back to painting. As twilight settled in, neighbors gathered at the town park for the long-postponed July 4th barbecue. The delay hadn't dulled anyone's appetite. Smoke curled from grills, kids shrieked as they darted between picnic tables, and God Bless America hummed from a fiddle near the gazebo. Ellie and Jack arrived with a tray of sweet tea and cornbread. Marlene handed them paper plates stacked high. Sheriff Mosley, in an apron that read, Kiss the Cook, served up ribs with surprising skill. He shook Jack's hand and then, without a hint of shame, asked Miss Green for a dance. She blushed and obliged. Beneath the glow of string lights, Ellie took the mic. The crowd quieted, murmurs settling like dust. We didn't fight to punish, she said, her voice calm and sure. We fought to remember who we are. Not rules, not fines, not bylaws, but neighbors. Friends. Families on porches. Thank you for standing beside me and behind Jack. Applause followed, soft, then swelling. Carter gave her a nod, proud but quiet. Later that night, Ellie sat back on the porch swing with her laptop, her fingers moving gently across the keys. Her final blog entry flowed easy. She closed it with a quote from Ruth's journal: "Porches are where memories are baked like bread, slow, warm, and meant to be shared." When she closed the laptop, stars had climbed high above the cedar shingles. Jack rocked beside her, sipping tea. "Think this old porch can handle another summer?" she asked, nudging him with her elbow. He smiled, eyes soft with memory. "With you on it? Forever." Even in the quiet hum of a summer evening, the porch lights of Oak Hollow seemed to shine a little brighter. Neighbors who once nodded in silence now lingered longer, sharing stories over sweet tea and laughter. What began as a fight over wooden planks became a reminder: when ordinary people stand up to quiet abuses, they can restore not just porches, but principles. Rules are meant to protect, not control, and true community thrives on trust, not fear. Like an old swing creaking back to life, it just takes one push to start the whole neighborhood moving again.